Hello sports fans, welcome to my very quick guide to Belenenses, the teams from Portugal's Bethlehem, or Belém, as it is in Portuguese. The club used the cross of the Order of Christ as their symbol. The Order of Christ were a group of usually young men during the medieval period. They used to be the Knights Templar, until they were banned by the Pope, and the Order of Christ were very involved in what's now called Portugal's discoveries, or the colonial journeys of the Portuguese. And it's from Belém where the sailors used to set sail, so just meters away from the stadium nowadays. The anthem, or as they call it in Portuguese, hymn of Belenenses, goes like this: consecrated and popular, our cross is the theme of the conquests beyond the seas. Now as ever, we have nothing to fear. Victory is guaranteed. And I'll post that song at the end of this video. The Ultras, as I know, the Ultras are all covered in blue. They meet in part of the stadium complex, which is now closed almost entirely. There used to be a big pool there, but they've lost a lot of money. So they meet in this basically abandoned warehouse, completely covered in blue. And the day when I went was for their last home match of the season of 2017 to 18, and we had a big barbecue and a choice between bifana, pork chop, or entremeada, which is pork belly. And I had 2 pork bellies, ladies and gents. Everyone chipped in for the barbie, and I cooked it. Everyone cooked it themselves, and it was a remarkably macho atmosphere, very warm, very welcoming, and quite interesting to see all the emblems all around the warehouse. Anti-fascist ones, British bulldogs, weirdly enough, Union Jacks, Fiorentina signs, really quite cosmopolitan feel to it. Lots of different ideas. These stickers stuck to the pinball machine and the bar and stuff like that. At the moment, they're in a real mess in terms of their ownership, who are threatening to move the club to the Algarve. The fans find themselves in a really awkward position of not wanting to cheer a team that might as well just sail down the Atlantic coast southwards. There is talk of creating a fan-owned team like AFC Wimbledon style. It's very grim. It's very sad. So the Ultras, who call themselves the Blue Fury, Fúria Azul, have found a sort of position where, really ambivalent place to be, where they want to support their team, but not a team that's sort of planted onto them, which has nothing to do with the fans. I didn't quite understand this, but there's talk of certain players being planted and made captains and then to be sold on, and all this mercenary and strategic financial business, which has nothing to do with the game, sadly. But translating something from a poster I read in the warehouse was the Fúria Azul continued to support our team despite the bitterness caused from what happened. There's some dreadful stuff, violence against the fans, according to them. Misuse of their emblems, the fans not being allowed to use their emblems in the stadium. And this one here is my favourite sticker. It says, support your local team and that the big 3 clubs go fuck themselves. Sporting Porto, Benfica. The fans feel very aggrieved at the strong influence of money, of course, in the league. The big 3 swallowing up their better players, and Belenenses as an organisation allowing to be dominated by the bigger teams and sort of bowing down to their every command. And the big 3's sheer arrogance and demeaning of the smaller clubs, really, really sad. And it's why a lot of Portuguese people admire the Premier League. 11 of the Primeira Liga clubs are based in the north, or the centre north, which is a little bit like Britain or England as it used to be, especially in the north. All the first English clubs were based in the north. I think it's Sheffield Hallam or Sheffield. Mark can tell us which one is the first one. Late 1870s, I think. Mark, you live about a couple of miles from the first football stadium of all time. So the only team based in the Algarve are from Portimão, and they're called the Portimonenses, or the Portimonenses, sorry. And they were the Belenenses opponents this May afternoon. Have a look at the Japanese squad this summer, as they should have a striker called Shoya, who's fantastic, on loan from FC Tokyo. He plays with Portimonense. He is fantastic watch. Great placer of the ball, good finisher, nippy, very, very tiny, and good attitude to playing, never gets too riled up, and very clear-minded. The Portimonense fans are so happy with him that they proudly display a Japanese flag at their games, which is nice to see. Portimonense played extremely well, I think. They just they were just one spot ahead of Belenenses, something like 15th. And they let Belenenses keep possession, and they made Belenenses look harmless. But as it happened, Belenenses got 2 pens, scored both of them, and the final result was 3-2, which didn't reflect the game at all. Portimonenses were fantastic, and so Belenenses didn't really deserve that, but hey-ho, happens against Belenenses sometime. Belenenses lost against Sporting quite recently in similar circumstances, some say because of rigged referee decisions, or at least a referee feeling the weight of a massive club on his shoulders and giving Sporting all the decisions. Nice to know that during half-time you can actually wander around the stadium and look at some of the matches that are going on simultaneously. There's futsal is a big deal there, and you can wander into the museum, which had ivory tusks, has trophies, really impressive stuff. I should mention that it's the 99th year of Belenenses. They were founded in 1919, making them one of Portugal's oldest clubs. And yeah, you can get cider, strangely, in a bar of the rugby team. And why you can get cider is probably some kind of loophole. Apparently in England, I don't remember this, but if you buy a pint, you have to down it indoors, out away from the stadium, and then nip out as second half starts. But yeah, every club in Portugal has at least a futsal team. Most would have a basketball, hockey team as well, and women's teams all over those sports. I think that's becoming maybe more common now in England as well, branching out into different sports. And outside the stadium, so when you leave, you can actually see some of these really old relics of Belém, the area of Belém, which is Bethlehem, in other words. There's an old monastery you can see from the stadium for the Hieronymite group of Catholic monks. And just briefly worth mentioning that the hymn, what they call the hymn or the anthem of Belenenses, consecrated and popular, our cross is the theme of the conquest beyond the seas. It is pretty distasteful stuff, considering that Portugal invented the transatlantic slave trade and made an awful lot of money out of it. And just a couple of stats. If we're in the 1500s in the same spot of the stadium, 10%, let's get this right, 10% of the population you would have seen around you were West Africans. Most of them were slaves, but there were some free slaves, or at least black West Africans, who managed to get up into the nobility, or at least get some status. But yeah, 10% of the population were black, which is quite extremely unusual at the time for Europe. Some of those slaves were Chinese and Japanese, as the Portuguese were comprehensive in the way they slaved or got involved in slaving. And another stat that I find quite mind-blowing is, if you imagine all of these ships sailing from Belém, the sailors would have walked from Lisbon to get there. And this is written down in a book on Portugal. 30% of the ships that set sail from Belém, from Portugal, in the 1500s, 30% of those ships sunk, and many more were invaded by pirates or attacked by pirates. And then there was scurvy. So not a pleasant time. And as uncomfortable as it is to hear this anthem and hear people talking over the glorious empire, it was very brave. Despite them being very cruel, it was very brave of these sailors. And on these ships they had things such as processions, they had theatre plays, theatre performances, they had, of course, masses, and executions would take place on these massive ships, the Nausch. They were mini cities, these ships, and people were on them for months and months and months, sailing quite literally into the unknown, a lot of them. So, apart from, one more thing, they were using the wind and the stars and the position of the sun, and that was it, pretty much. Their instruments were quite primitive in the early days, so they were using what's called dead reckoning, just using the wind, stars and the sun to navigate. So you can see why they've used words like bravery and courage in their hymn lyrics. Enjoy the anthem. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm getting used to making these videos, so this is just for some practice. Ciao for now. Força Belenenses!